everyone's heard about the CBD tinctures and the cannabinoid oils in the news. So we wanted to go to the source. And so for our next speaker, she's the first one to make CBD-rich cannabis oils, as well as the first to create a standardized flower-based THC and CBD medicinal protocol that remains the most sought-after cannabis cancer treatment today. Everybody, welcome to the stage, Constance Finley.
So I was asked to talk a little bit about what I do and how I did it and where we are now. So we're calling this talk Farm to Tablet, Standardizing Whole Plant Cannabinoid Therapeutics. So when I started this journey, it was about 7 years ago, almost to the day, in 2008. I was hoping to save some quality of life for myself, to bring some kind of joy back into my life, and to possibly stop an early death from the amount of inflammation that was raging. I had no idea that this would become something I did for other people, or that I would be standing here talking to you today about cannabinoid therapeutics. Our bodies evolved in a very complex lock and key mechanism, a system to which cannabis fits. That's what makes it fairly unique in the plant kingdom. There's 22 plants altogether that do it, but cannabis is the queen. So a vast network of cannabinoid receptors is within major parts of our body. We continue to find them in new parts. So at first it was thought they're only in the immune system. No, they're heavily in the brain, immune system, gut, etc., etc. So they play a really important role in our health, and it's becoming understood very recently. This is groundbreaking science that's happening right now, that we're beginning to understand that the endocannabinoid system is actually the oil, the regulating, communicating between all the major systems. So the reason cannabis appears to be a miracle drug is that it actually controls and contributes to the regulation of most of the systems in our bodies. That's why the effects are so broad-based. But the reason we're here talking about this today, the reason I'm getting to stand and spend this afternoon a little bit of time with you, is because of the phytocannabinoids, the ones that come from the plants, not the ones that we internally produce. Now, the phytocannabinoids from cannabis, it's said from different scientists, different numbers are thrown out, but basically between 80 and 100 different cannabinoid levels, different cannabinoid substances in the phytocannabinoids of the cannabis plant. We know mainly about two of those, right? THC and CBD. We know a lot more now about 5 or 6 of the acids, but there's a whole lot of minor ones we don't even know about. But the reason they capture our attention is because they work in our bodies so well, because our bodies process them and they produce the same effect that our endocannabinoids produce. So what was once smoked in secrecy, right? Back alleys, racial slurs, college dormitories, all kinds of class and political references of derision. That's where it came from in most of our awarenesses. But now, in the study of several cancer models, both in vitro and in vivo, which means in a petri dish and in a small mammal, cannabinoids have been shown to stop cancer cells from proliferating and growing new blood vessels. So that's one way that cannabis contributes to health in people who are experiencing a crisis of health with cancer. THC and CBD both kill cancerous and non-cancerous tumors while actively supporting the health of the normal cells around them. Now, that's an extraordinary statement, you guys. In general, in allopathic medicine, we trade time for health. We take something and there's a side effect and we know the trade-off. In the point of cannabis killing cancer, there isn't a bad trade-off. So you can look on our website, which is constancecbd.com. And you will find a slide with Dr. Jahan Marcou's work. He is now the head scientist for Americans for Safe Access, but at that time he was a fellow in Dr. Sean McAllister's lab in San Francisco at CPMC. And there's a time-lapse video. You can see THC and CBD killing cancer cells. We also know that in cancer patients, there's very elevated levels of cannabinoid receptors that occur. And so researchers are postulating that that's because that's the body's response. That's the way to fight the cancer the best. Now, I'm only referring so far to research about cannabis and cancer. There's a host of other diseases and other aspects to this plant. The plant's medical potential is much, much more than just in oncology. So a study published in the American Journal of Medicine, it doesn't get any more prestigious. That study suggests that cannabinoids could play a very important role in regulating blood sugar. So I've met the fellow who is managing the program for the Chinese government, who they have spent billions of dollars trying to get CBD effectively researched in their country because they know there's a lot of evidence that shows it cures type 1 diabetes. The Chinese government's budget for diabetes type 1 is bigger than its military budget. So contrary to what we would expect, the Chinese government has spent billions researching this. CBD on its own, it's antispasmodic, it's anticonvulsive, it's neuroprotective, it's serotonin enhancing to a remarkable degree, so therefore antidepressive. And new research is showing that it's actually antipsychotic. Contrary to what everybody said, cannabis might make you sane. Cannabis is known to have extraordinarily strong antimicrobial properties. So in the midst of this crisis of the antibiotics that we've developed and hugely overused by putting them in our food chain everywhere to save money and processed food faster out the door, we're in trouble with antibiotics. Cannabis has a lot to say. It also has a really powerful effect on our well-being, which most of us know. That's how most of us got into using it, is because it made us feel good. As Michael Pollan said, when I finally got to read his very lovely book, Botany of Desire, he talks about that one of the wonderful effects of cannabis is that it allows us to forget. Now, forgetting is really an important part of going on, of moving forward, of healing, of actually training our bodies and our minds in a different way. And cannabis is extraordinarily helpful in helping us protect ourselves from the assault internally and externally by allowing us to go on. These amazing discoveries continue. I was in Nova Scotia in July for 6 days of academic research, and every 15 minutes, most of those 6 days, a new academic paper was presented by a team of scientists only from the past year and only on CBD and THC and its acid forms and derivatives. So the research is incredible. There's tons of it. And it's showing that mammals actually have a really clear preference for whole plant cannabinoid therapeutics versus single molecule derived therapeutics. Now, it didn't surprise me that THC and CBD did a whole lot better in vivo studies than synthetic drugs like Marinol, things that even, for instance, in the military where that's all they can use in head injuries, those people hate it. They wish so much they could get the real THC and CBD. So that didn't surprise me. But what we recently learned is if you take a whole plant CBD and you derive a single molecule of only the CBD, you will not have as good an effect for healing and for therapeutic purposes in mammals as if you used the whole plant CBD. So big difference. And what it suggests is that the future of medicine is actually headed in this direction. Whole plant therapeutics could be the future, not the past. So it's clear that cannabis is out of the closet. In a way, not having this room overflowing today shows me how commonplace we're becoming, right? If 4 or 5 years ago, it probably would have been a different audience, and it probably would have been mobbed. The good news is that we're really making progress, and it's not such a radical idea that cannabis is helpful. We've done things in the last, well, in fact, in this calendar year, like speaking at South by Southwest for the very first time ever in a cannabis science panel with some Canadian scientists. We opened the California Academy of Sciences Nightlife in San Francisco to a discussion and talk on cannabis, and they want us back. Amazing things are happening. So what we've tried to do is combine my personal therapeutic research into cannabis with the business acumen that I came with before I got sick and discovered cannabis. And we've tried to put that with a very stringent science-based methodology to really bring forward what is the potential of this medicine in its whole form. So as I said, I began this journey about 7 years ago, and I'm here today because of a set of serendipitous circumstances. I came to cannabis late in life, and against my better judgment, I like to say. I had my back at the wall, and at 44 years old, I was a successful entrepreneur. I loved what I did. I helped syndicate low-income housing and bring high-quality housing to the working poor. In fact, my first project was on West Harper Avenue in West Hollywood. It was the first project for people who were still dying of AIDS at that time, and it won all kinds of design awards and had a major nonprofit involved here. I loved what I did. But one day, after undergoing shoulder surgery, I became very, very sick. And I won't go into details, but my pain was so debilitating that I was housebound for 10 years. I spent thousands of dollars exploring alternative treatments, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. I used up my savings trying to get well with an improper diagnosis. And finally, at about 10 years, I met a brilliant rheumatologist who is a genius at diagnostics. And within 10 minutes, he said, "I think I know what's wrong with you." And by the end of the day, we had it figured out. So I have severe ankylosing spondylitis. It's kind of like rheumatoid arthritis. So I rapidly went through all the drugs he had to offer. He was a drug researcher. He has a huge practice. He put me on the biologics. These drugs cost several $1,000s a month. They really radically change some people's lives, but they have very severe side effect potential. So what happened is that they helped me, and then I would get very severe side effects. And the last one, it wasn't clear I'd live for about 4 years. So no more drugs for me, back to being an invalid, not exactly the life I wanted to have. So when I met with the doctor and he said, "No, nothing else. We cannot risk giving you anything else for this condition, and the main risk you have is that you'll die early of a heart attack and not be able to have any life until then." But my friends were saying, "You really got to explore cannabis." And oddly enough, I was pretty prejudiced against doing so. I had no issue whatsoever smoking cannabis at a party, being around people who smoked it, but I myself didn't want to be addicted. And I believe the nonsense out there that says that's what would happen to me. I now know, from what I've learned over this 7 years, that National Institute of Health, NIH, actually says there is no physical pathway for addiction in cannabis. So I thought it was okay to have a couple of glasses of Pinot Noir with my meal, and that was an addiction. I somehow thought it was going to be addicting if I smoked cannabis. Silliness that I grew out of, okay? So I began growing it indoors in 2008 out of desperation. And when I could first have testing, it was significantly later. When the labs opened in Northern California, they had to recalibrate their machines each time we brought anything in because they had never seen the potency that we had. The first time we had it tested, we went to Steep Hill Labs, which was the first one in Northern California, and a young man named Nick Ryan was working there. And I went back several times asking why everyone else had gotten their test results and we still hadn't. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, "Who are you? We've had to redo all of our machines. We've never seen anything like this. Normally, people bring us in, this is way back then, remember, 1 to 3% CBD levels. You brought us in 68%. So since that time, I've said no to a lot of dispensaries who've wanted to carry our stuff. We've tried to keep this in a tightly controlled situation because doctors have been the ones referring to us, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So that was back in 2009. I start making the oils. 2010, I think CBD comes in. We get the very first tranche. We start making the first CBD oils. We're making high THC oils. And some of my own doctors started asking me about it a little bit. And I met this attorney in 2012. And he had glioblastoma. He was famous for having lived for 3 years. And he was suing all the cell phone companies, saying that they suppressed the evidence. And so he had convinced a small dispensary in San Jose to make a kind of a primitive Rick Simpson type oil. So he was crediting his staying alive partially with that, but he was never expected to be cancer-free. So he started taking my oil, and he had a recommendation. It was all legal. I gave it to him, and he joined my collective, and he started sending me texts at 3 in the morning. Oh, my God, I can pee like a racehorse, and other inappropriate things. When are you going into business with me? You're a genius. And it was really important for me because no one else but me had experienced my oils, and I didn't know about the quality difference of what I'd done. I was just trying to do what I was trying to do for myself. And I'm a fanatic and a perfectionist and a super palate, taster and those kind of things. So he then brought me a man from Texas who had 6 weeks to live. And the man from Texas got a recommendation from the same doctor. It was legal for me to deal with him. We said, why not try? So he started taking tiny amounts of it. And in 3 weeks, when he came to me, his left arm was paralyzed completely. And in 3 weeks, he regained full use of the arm. And so that was pretty exciting. So they rushed him into an MRI, and they saw that the tumor had shrunk 60%. And this fellow wasn't on anything else because it was hopeless. It was go home and die time. So he continued to take small amounts, and in 7 weeks, the tumor was 100% gone, according to his oncology team. So what happened is there was a very famous oncologist who worked with both of those people. And when they started telling him what happened, he started sending me tons of people. And I couldn't deal with a lot of them legally. I was scared to answer the phone, to tell you the truth. I didn't know who was going to be on the other end of it. And I didn't want to slip up and do anything inadvertently to get myself in trouble. But what happened is that 28 people came legally and followed the program. Everyone was stage 4. Everyone was second occurrence. Everyone was nothing else is working. They were still trying some things, but statistically they would not expect success. So out of the 28, 26 went into remission according to their oncologists. And that's now been verified, so I can now say these things. We were introduced in Reno at an oncology conference for doctors, a big conference by this same doctor, where he talked about the outcome study that he did. It's not a double-blind clinical study. In fact, in cancer, that wouldn't even be ethical, and it is not as good as we could get if we have cooperation and get this drug off Schedule 1, this plant. But anyway, it's a hell of a lot better than anybody else has in the world, and we're very excited about it. So he just published a book last week, and he dedicated it to me, and he has a chapter on me and Rick Simpson. So that book is called Stoned, and his name is Dr. James Forsyth. It wasn't the best, most original name in the world, was it? So what happened, I'm jumping ahead of the story here, but after that doctor sent me stuff, his word was spreading. People were coming to me that were growing and saying, what are you doing? What's the ratio you're using? All that kind of stuff. Started trying to do what I was doing. And we were approached by SF Weekly, who said, would you speak about what you're doing? And it felt very, very risky, and no one else that they could find who was dabbling in it, or like Valerie Carell or anyone else, would come up and do it. So I naively said yes. And then I had a high anxiety period for quite a while. I thought it was going to be a little chapter in the back of it was on the front cover of SF Weekly. So we started getting about 250 phone calls a day from around the world. 150 emails a day. I didn't take a day off for 7 months. I worked about 12 to 18 hours. And remember, I still have an autoimmune condition. So at about 7 months, I said, we've got to do something to take this to a different level. This is going to kill me, and we can't continue to meet these needs without scaling up. So I understood that I had done something unique, that this was worthy of effort, and so I basically just put a person on the phones and said, do what you can to meet the need, and my job is going to be to get this stuff patented, to get some standard operating procedures, to get a standardization as far as we can go, because that's a unique thing about what we've done. We have stacks and stacks and stacks of tests. New labs are using our data to help calibrate their machines and establish their database, because we have a longer history of testing cannabis oil than anyone else. So I thought it was important and that we better focus on this. And so about 7 years later, $1 million, I took money out of my house mortgage. I did anything I had to do to keep this going. I basically gave up every aspect of my life because people kept calling saying that they were living. And that's a pretty compelling thing. Cannabis helped me, but then it got to help all these other people, and it gave me an intellectual life of passionate interest back. I had a notion at that time of a big apothecary, a compounding pharmacy, and that's still how I feel about it. We have about 40 different oils. We work with the same genetics that we have preserved, and our farmers now, it's not just me growing, it's our farmers and our collective. Everybody's organic at least, although you can't claim that with the federal law, but we're at least organic. We're really into soil health. We believe that's where everything starts. We have a patent pending with multiple herbal combinations and an incredible vape pen software, the oil. We're hoping to continue. We've been approached by universities and, one university, and by the Marijuana Project that is putting together the training for doctors. We have been accessed by 3 different foreign governments and by a couple of states asking for us to help give their scientists some information about what is the best source of CBD, etc. The world is changing, folks. We're bringing in a professional management team, and we're attracting talent that only technology could attract before this. I am so excited about our next 10 years. What excites us the most is not the monetary potential, it's the medical potential with this fully realized and incorporated into what doctors and nurses and acupuncturists could use with their clients. We want to work with educating that community and giving them the standardized medicine that they can relate to and understand. We want to continue to shift the dialogue to whole plant therapeutics, away from single molecule, away from synthetics. And we wanted to remember that the best CBD comes from the flowering part of the cannabis plant. I love hemp. I love Danny Fontaine. I love batteries made from blast. I am so excited about hemp. I think CBD ideally comes from cannabis flowers. We are constantly advocating on behalf of THC. Because we were the first in the world to make CBD oil, and because we're part of that group of like Project CBD and other real deep scientifically oriented organizations, we get to say, yes, CBD is great, and the world needs THC. And what kills cancer best is THC. We're looking into areas of customizing individual therapies. A scientist, 7 years with Gilead Sciences, so I'm sure you guys have mainly heard of them. He joined me as our principal scientist about 6 months ago, and it opens up the world to us. So we can order equipment I couldn't order before. We can get testing done that couldn't happen before. So we're getting to look at what are the blood levels in different people from our medicine, because it's very individual, and we can start to document that and give that help back to the patients. We're looking at bioavailability and introducing unique economies of scale that could really change things and make this available to more people in a more affordable and broad-based way. We think that acceptance of this plant isn't just going to change research and medicine and health. It also is a change in culture. If cannabis is truly accepted again in regular use, it's a kinder and a gentler world that we want to help bring about.
You want to field questions?
If there's time. Does anybody want to ask any questions shortly? No, we're unique. Nobody else in the world is doing this so far. We use tightly trimmed, the most expensive part of the plant, the bud only. When I'm talking about whole plant cannabinoid therapeutics, I'm saying we're not manufacturing THC synthetically and shoving it into a vape pen, right? You can do that really cheaply, and you can sell it all day long as THC. We're talking about preserving the terpenes. I, for some reason, was a fanatic about that from the very beginning, so that we were the first in the world to work with the vacuum ovens that are used in the dabbing industry. I believe cancer patients deserve as good of aesthetics as the dabbers. How about that? One more? Right. Yeah, I think it's going to be changing, but that's a very, very important part of what Society of Cannabis Clinicians has done. They've worked with the Marijuana Project that's working with us, whose name I forget. Kyle, what's the name? Medical Cannabis Institute developed the training for doctors that is now on Society of SCC, Society of Science. Thank you. All right. So now you can have actual, true, certified. Also, I want to mention Dustin Sulak, an osteopath in Maine, has just opened up a website called healer.com. His ambition is to be the Andrew Weil of cannabis, and he deserves to be. He's a genius, and he's a fun, sweet, smart person. So these sources are opening up. The University of Pennsylvania accessed us through Ethan Russo, who used to be at GW, and asked us to edit the cannabis and cancer potential. And I was just in Hawaii talking with the Drug Policy Forum, who is asking if we can help contribute to drug doctor education there in cannabis. It's a really important part of what I see our mission as, because we have more clinical data at this point than anybody else, the 7 years of working with this super potent medicine. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, sure.
I have a family member that's recovered from her surgery. You mentioned that you did so many phone calls, but she's having a really hard time finding a doctor, like you're saying, to help with it.
Right.
Did she go to your website?
Yes, let me tell you just a bit about that. I evolved this as a coaching model. When I was young, before I was a business person, I'd been a psychologist, and I myself had been afraid of addiction and, euphoria. So I was really able to help cancer patients get through this process. So after about 5 years, Kyle, would you stand up? Kyle DeMedio is head of patient support with me. We have... We have 3 other people that he supervises and works with. His history is pre-med from Cal. His family wanted him to be a doctor. He then went and did home health counseling training for 2 years. He's brilliant at his job and really serves our patients well. And if you send an email to our website, we will get back to you.
All right, everybody, give it up for Constance Finley. Thank you. Thank you so much, and we'll be getting up in just a couple more minutes. Everybody, I want you to welcome to the stage Jeff Clark, Director, that's right, of CCHI 2016.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for having me here today. I am the Director, Jeff Clark, CCHI 2016, which is a cannabis hemp initiative. And I'd like to point out that you guys, this is an educated group. This isn't like the people that I usually talk to at a HempCon or a High Times. You guys actually know what's going on. I know that you guys are the ones out there making the changes. You guys are the ones that have been fighting for this for a long time. I myself have been at it for about 46 years trying to get it legalized. Our Lieutenant Governor recently said he had the Blue Ribbon Commission. We all know about this, but I heard a recent quote from him that said, we got to keep the prices high and the taxes high to keep it out of our children's hands. Now, to me, every teenager I see out there, they got a $500 iPhone and a $100 plan that goes with it every month. And raising the prices and taxing it high is not going to keep it out of the children's hands. The children are going to get a hold of it just like we got a hold of beers when we were 16 and our wine and whatever. It's going to happen, and hopefully the parents can educate their children not to do that. And the main thing is I just wanted to comment on the tax that's going on in a couple of different states. Colorado, for instance, charged too much tax, and they had to return it to the taxpayers. Now, there's just one problem with keeping the prices high and taxing high. California is the 7th largest economy in the world. In the world. That means there's countries that don't even come close to us. And California, if we cap an excise tax, a total tax of 10% on cannabis, California is going to receive probably 20 to 30 times what Colorado did in a year. We can't tax it excessively. You can't price it excessively. Prop 215 is a compassionate movement. There's a lot of people, a lot of veterans that can't afford the high prices. A lot of elderly can't afford the high prices. We can't afford the OxyContin or the blood pressure medicines that they prescribe to us. So the main reason I say you can't do this, and I would like everybody to sort of think about it a little bit, is if you're out there selling in your collective a $100 bag of pot and they charge 40% and it's going to cost you $140 for your medicine, I'm sorry, I was the black market guy for 30 years before Prop 215, and if you charge $140 for a $100 bag of cannabis, I'm going to be on the street corner selling it for $90, and I'm not going to ask for an ID. Where the collectives is going to check the IDs. We're going to make sure it's adults. We're going to make sure it's medical or recreational. The drug dealers aren't. They will not check an ID. You come up to them with the money, they're going to sell it to you. So the notion of pricing high and taxing high, to me, I'm sorry, I'm just a broke old hippie, but to me it sounds kind of ridiculous. I'd like to introduce Patrick Moore. He's also a director of CCHI 2016. And Jeanette Perez. Patrick is probably the most knowledgeable guy I know as far as hemp and cannabis knowledge through the centuries. But before I get down, I wanted to say hi to Steve out there, Bruce Margolin, Richard Eastman, back in the back, Hal Lewis. We've got some major heavy hitters here today. And thank you all for coming, because you know what? We are making the change, and we're going to make it the right way. Patrick.
Thank you so much, Jeff Clark, the Red-Eyed Jedi. Honored to be here today. We're going to cover a little bit about the history of cannabis, because it's where it all starts. Cannabis was the foundation of human evolution. There's a growing field in anthropology placing cannabis at the center of our food at about 80% for the last 200,000 years. So if you get a perspective of how close, how interconnected we are with this plant, it is that logic is the only thing that explains the endocannabinoid system. The fact that we have an integrated system in almost every aspect of our body that connects with cannabinoids could only have come about by constant daily consumption. And even, as far in as I've gotten to this, we've been tapping the marijuana, hemp and the marijuana conspiracy. That was the subtitle of Jack Hare's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. So we've been digging deeper and deeper into that conspiracy. And of course, it just gets bigger and bigger the further you go. But even I was surprised as complete academic outsiders stepped in and said 80% of the human diet for the last 50, 100, 200,000 years, cannabis hemp. So that just starts to explain this perspective that cannabis is not so much a drug as it is a nutrient. You can call vitamin C a medicine. You can call vitamin D a medicine. You can call calcium a medicine. But really, it's a nutrient. And the problem is a deficiency in that nutrient, not so much a outside medicine curing this condition. So I'm hoping to see in the next 10, 20 years a transition over to where we can start addressing cannabis as it truly is one of our essential nutrients. And at that point, we can define the endocannabinoid deficiency, which is something I've started to see in academia the last couple of years, and really get to the root of this problem, the root of this situation. We believe it is quintessentially important not only to focus on cannabis as medicine, which has been beautifully addressed here today. I helped work on Prop 215, out in the streets getting signatures. That's how real progress happens in the state. But we need to think about cannabis as planet medicine. John Trudeau put it so well in some of his poems and some of his speeches, that the way cannabis works with our body, the way the flowers, the oils, the terpenes, all these things work with our body, hemp works with our planet. So as a type of planet medicine, we can replace petroleum, we can replace nuclear, we can replace the cutting down of trees, we can replace all of that with one plant. And not that there aren't huge potentials with algae and funguses, and right around the bio-revolution, which hemp is going to spearhead, are these other tools and other technologies we have that, again, can each by themselves replace petroleum, none as easily as cannabis hemp. So we're spearheading this movement, and the irony is so many European countries, Canada, places in Asia, went industrial when we went medical. So we have redefined the way the world sees medicine. We have redefined the way cannabis fits into our vernacular. But we are losing the 21st century battle for resources. The Germans are replacing their petroleum, they're replacing their plastics, they're building houses, they're building cars. BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz are all 30, 40. There's a new BMW that's 60% hemp. And meanwhile in California, we're still digging mines and cutting down the last of our redwood trees. We have to create the planet medicine that takes the toxins out of our culture and prevents the cancers in the first place. Yes, THC and cannabinoids can cure cancer, but industrial hemp can prevent cancer. So that's point number one. I'd like to pass the mic to lovely Jeanette Perez here.
Thank you, everyone. I feel honored to be here and to be speaking with you all today. Yes, this is the past, present, and future about the industrial cannabis industry. And one of the things that we're addressing in the present is getting it done right. As Jeff Clark mentioned, there are a lot of problems with legalization and how it looks in Colorado and places like Washington and Oregon, et cetera. And what we have with us here in the state is the fact that in 96, 97, California set the trend for worldwide reawakening, bringing it back to the consciousness of the people and bringing it back to our bodies and to our environments. And so California has a big responsibility. People have said, well, why California hasn't legalized fully, but we do and are seeing that to our advantage now, because a lot of support that we didn't have with farmers, and this is for medical marijuana and dispensary owners, they had resistance towards such a radical form of legalization. And when we say radical, it's not out in left field. It's going back to the root. As most of you can remember in mathematics, the radical goes back to the root. It's not out there. It is very much what we were nurturing as a nation, and then was taken away by certain interest groups. And so now is the time to bring it back. And we're doing that again with Jack Hare and all the other pioneers, Richard Davis and Tom McCormick and Chris Conrad and Brenda Kirschenbaum, et cetera, and all these individuals that put so much time and effort into bringing us something that is tangibly accessible to the state. And we are basically in prime for it now. This is prime time. I wanted to address some of the things that Aja had mentioned and acknowledge the work that Miko is doing because we've seen the problems of the industry, the cannabis industry, not encourage or shun the community away. And really the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative is the opportunity to merge those two and have the community become empowered by becoming the industry and having access to the industry. And that's ultimately what's going to change our reality in tangible ways. Again, we don't have much, I don't know or see much hope in the world. There's a lot of entertainment and there's a lot of things that make us feel good, but there's not a lot of options that the established powers have to offer our generation and the next generations that are coming after us. And so we have a responsibility so far that we still have this democratic process. We're, again, just a reminder, a lot of you probably know this, but only 11 states in the Republic have the People's Initiative process. So that means that California, out of the 11 states in the Republic, we can come together, write down a decent piece of law, get it on the ballot, and if the people pass it, it's good to go. Just like Prop 15 did, just like one of the reasons why we're all here is because of that as well. And so we're asking for you all to become involved in, again, becoming the steering the ship of what real legalization looks like, not just in California, but we also have all these other states in the Republic that are waiting also to formulate their legalization efforts. And California leads in the world. Jeff Clark mentioned it again. We are always within the top 10 economies of the world. And so we have this responsibility to do it right here in the state and also to lead how it's done right worldwide. I'll speak more about what are the actual things we're doing to mobilize people here in the state and get this on the ballot, but I'll let Patrick go ahead and share some more.
Food, fuel, fiber, medicine, and so much more. The plastic industry alone is a game changer globally. So we know this is what we're heading towards. We're going to have to spend a little time catching up. Like I said, we've fallen behind Germany, Canada, Thailand, but we are California. The catch-up process is there. It's how we lay the groundwork that's going to make the most difference. This industry can be split up 1,000 ways, or it can be split up 100,000 ways, or it can be split up 1,000,000 ways. The Jack Hare Initiative wants to see this industry split up 1,000,000 ways. We want you and you and you, everybody, to have fair and equal access to the cannabis plant. Because if we legalize it, but create a set of regulations and licensing fees and taxes that keep 95%, 98%, the 99% out of the cannabis industry, we are doing ourselves and future generations the greatest disservice we could. Would be better to leave it in the underground. It would be... I don't mind having waited. I don't mind having skipped 2010. I don't mind not being the first state in the country to legalize cannabis, although it would have been sweet. I would rather be remembered as the best state that legalized cannabis the best way. We demand fair and equal access, the way the Jack Herer Initiative, and Jack Herer was brilliant. I mean, he really was a brilliant man. The work he did on the book was famous worldwide. He spent 30 years crafting this initiative with the help of dozens, scores, if not over 100 different people in this community, including Chris Conrad and Todd McCormick and so many of the people we've talked about already today, have their 2 cents worth in on this initiative. It's a well-vetted piece of legislation, simple in its terms. I like to call it legal poetry, because it's been whittled down and whittled down and whittled down like a fine piece of poetry, to where every line carries a weight to it that is so much more. And that's the power of this type of legislation. There are different philosophies in law, but to state it clearly and simply is the most powerful tool you can give a judge. To write 40 pages of intricate detail defining each and every aspect of this industry gives a lot of room for abuse. Gives a lot of room for people in the establishment down the road to twist things. Like 215, if you state your points clearly and you leave no room for doubt, the judges will always have to lean on the side of the patient. They'll always lean on the side of the cannabis community, because that's the intent of the law. As important as every detail is, the overall intent of the law is the ultimately most important point of law. And the Jack Herer Initiative, much like Prop 215, so clearly defined the intent of law as being on our side. I refer to the Jack Herer Initiative as it's the one that protects us against them. Everything else I see is protecting them from us. Why can I only have 8 plants? Why can I only have 3 or 4 ounces? Why am I confined by 10 or 20 or 30 other pieces of regulation and control that make my life as an herbalist somewhat unnatural, somewhat unnormal? Why am I always going to have to be concerned? There have been legislation that said it's a felony to smoke in the presence of a minor introduced here in California in the last 6 years. I don't want to live like that. After 80 years of carrying the burden we have, we took a plan. There's references in the 1920s and 30s amongst these drug warriors that by the year 2000, cannabis would be an academic anomaly. It would be a little something a few people here and there would know about. I mean, 10% of the world's culture is wearing a ganja leaf on their hat. That did not work. We have blown this up so big that their only recourse, their only solution at this point is, if they can't get rid of it, it's to control it. And I see, again, the vast majority of the legalization movement, and I won't go into all the personals on it, but the agenda has become hyper-control, hyper-regulation, hyper-taxation, and I can see nothing more damaging for a grassroots community in this state, the emerging multi-trillion-dollar industry in this state, than any of that. So 10% control on taxes, a 10% limit, a licensing fee limit at $1,000. Nobody can ever be licensed more than $1,000 a year to be involved in any form of the cannabis industry. Think about that for a second, and think about that over the next years. You hear about Nevada, and you hear about New York, and you hear about these places where they're auctioning these things off for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. They have raffles places to see who's going to run the cannabis industry. It's turning into a weird kind of obscene game, big money game, and that's not America. That's not the principles of our founding fathers. The principles of our founding fathers, if I'd like to remind you, you had to grow cannabis the first 100 years of this country. If they gave you that bag of 100 seeds and came back the next year and you didn't have cannabis growing, and not necessarily American in principle, but they might take your land. That is how important cannabis is to America, and we're not going there quite yet. The Jack Herer Initiative says you can have 99 plants and 12 pounds. You aren't required to. Like I said, not yet. There may be a place down the road where we actually really need this resource to save humanity. But if we start soon enough, we can avoid those crises. If we start right now, we don't get to a point 10, 20 years down the road where we're facing global, whatever the worst case scenario is. We can pull back. We can stop the nuclear power plants within the next 2-3 years. We can cut down the last tree in California in the next couple years. That's the potential. That's what the Jack Herer Initiative is about. It's not about deciding who's going to sell flowers to who and who can make the most money. This is about saving the hemp can save the planet, but only if we can use it. Only if we actually have it in our hands to do.
All right. And so what this initiative is doing is it's creating an opportunity for people like myself who have had a lot of education and just didn't really see anything coming from that. It wasn't really teaching me entrepreneurial skills. It wasn't really guaranteeing that I was going to get to pay my college loans back and things like that. And as an educator myself, I mean, how could I put myself in front of a classroom and sit there and lie to the students about what was actually going on? And I don't actually talk to them about cannabis, but unless it comes up. But the issue is that there's so much about what makes us unique. When I say us, I mean this republic. Okay, we're part of a republic. It's had different formations, and this is ultimately what we are. And we're losing freedoms every day. And cannabis hemp is really unique in that every facet of society, you have the business people, and you have the doctors, and you have the lawyers, and you have the teachers, and the artists, and the musicians, and so on and so on. Maybe they're not all out there yet. Maybe they haven't all exposed themselves, but we all know that they all consume cannabis. And so it's just really a great platform for me as an educator and as an academic, because it really brings in a diverse group of people. And one of the things that I've looked for in my journey in life is to attract a group of people that organically come together to enact powerful, powerful change in the world. And we really believe and know that this is it. I mean, the world has spoken. Briefly, just to address some of the issues from the first panel regarding the Latino, Black, and Asian communities. I mean, yes, there's still resistance, but at the same time, I've also seen, because health is such an issue, that's something that none of us can escape. I mean, the American Medical Association says 1 in 3 individuals will develop cancer or already has it. And so that's something, we can't get away from that. And people are becoming more and more open to it because their grandmothers, their mothers, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, their best friends, their wives are going through something. And we understand that chemotherapy is not a pretty good therapy if you want to live longer or if you actually want to survive it. And so there is still resistance, but there is a pocket of individuals who, like us, are risk takers and are willing to live versus slowly die in something that can become very archaic if we don't take the reins and start creating the shift first through cannabis hemp, and then let's deal with all the other issues, because that's not, again, cannabis can help save the world, but it's a catalyst for a lot of the other things that we need to address. And because it brings so many people together, it's easier to do so with this in this effort. And so I'm very inspired by a lot of the people that came here to support our particular group, and also the Cannabis Education Forum, Dustin Frazier and Diane Vandalvinos. They are representatives from Fresno County, and they drove all the way down here to support us. And Jay Benjamin also is here as well. And from the South Bay, Shari Saunders, and we have 2 advisory board members, Brendan Kirschenbaum and Bruce Margolin, here with us. And it's just I feel honored to be working with a group of intergenerational individuals, which, again, our society does not encourage us. If you remember, part of the educational system was you weren't supposed to talk to the people who weren't in your grade. It was supposed to be taboo, or what were you doing? And so the goal of divide and conquer and compartmentalization has really worked. I hear it with my students when they say, oh, that's a 6th grader or a 7th grader. I can't talk to them. And I'm like, really? You guys are so lucky you come from a rich background. I work right now with predominantly Chinese American students, and I try to remind them about the intergenerational richness of their culture and other cultures, and how we should really strive as individuals to maintain that and not let ourselves be compartmentalized. And again, this initiative is not about compartmentalization. It deals with cannabis hemp in all its uses, because it is so diverse, and yet it is that plant. And so what we're asking for is well, we need your help. I try to stay away from the word need. I'm trying to find a better way to convince you that that you want to be part of our team. And what does that mean? It means that you're sharing the word about this initiative in the state, and however you feel comfortable doing that. We have a formal process where you can become part of our campaign team, or you can do it on your own. And if you seek support, please, we'd like to support you in whatever way possible as well. And getting educated on the language is also part of our responsibility. We're working with again, creating a tight net here in the state so that we get this on the ballot and then get it passed. And the battle isn't won with just getting it on the ballot. We need your help in educating those around you, because as Caroline said, don't let anyone. I know this group is going to read the texts of the initiatives that are out there, but I know you know people who may not and may be counting on your influence and your opinion. And so I ask you to do your due diligence and guide them wisely. I'm not telling you need to support us, but definitely do your aspect of the research and guide those around you appropriately. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, we could just talk all day here, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a few more points about the initiative in particular. We all think, does anybody here know anybody who's gone to jail? Anybody had any trouble with cannabis along the way? Anybody know anybody who still knows somebody who's in jail here in California, right? I mean, there we go. So what's the least we can do? Let's get them out of jail, right? Let's get them out, right. What would be the most we could do? Let's get them out and erase their records 100%. Not expunge them, erase them. So if they happen to be in D.C. 20 years down the road trying to get some clearance, they never have to report that they were once a narcotics felon in California for having a little garden. So the CCHI allows for the free release of all prisoners involved in any nonviolent cannabis crime and the complete erasure of their records as if it never happened. You know who the new criminal is going to be? Because, again, ironically, like I said, a lot of these other initiatives feel like they're trying to protect the big industry from us. We're only going to have 6 plants. We're criminal if we have more than 4 ounces. Which, again, if you think about it, if you're allowed to have 8 or 10 plants, what are you going to have at some point? More than 4 or 6 ounces or whatever so literally, there are all these laws that keep pushing out on us that make us a criminal 2-3 months out of the year. So again, when she says vet the initiative, read through it critically, read through it like this is going to be the next 20, 30 years of our life. We like the cannabis community. We like the fact that we throw events and these cups and these get-togethers. If we pass the wrong legislation, don't think they won't take that away from you. Don't think what we have right now is guaranteed, because my reading of a lot of these laws is they want us to give up 30, 40, 50% of what we have now and then call that legalization. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool Californians about weed. We know what's up. We said no before. We don't need to rush off in some crazy direction. We've got the most progressive laws in the world on cannabis. We've had them for 19 years. So we can only go, logically, one direction. There's only one initiative I know that's going to take us in that direction, and that's the CCHI by Jack Hare. CCHI2016.org, or on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere you look for us, we're there. We're the largest, one of the most epic grassroots movements in the history of the world, and we're just starting to stir again. We just filed last week. We'll start collecting signatures in late October. It's just a matter of feet in the streets.
You guys want to take questions?
Yes, exactly. Let's take some questions. And Hemp Parade!
So do we have any?
Absolutely. Ironically, the biggest problem we have right now with the legalization of hemp and then moving forward with it in a natural way in the future is that we lost alcohol prohibition. You might have heard differently. I bet you have, because throughout my entire life, I've had thousands of people chant at me how we won alcohol prohibition and how proud we should be, and how I don't really need to worry about this cannabis thing so much because we won alcohol prohibition and we're going to defeat them all. Then in my research, I found out alcohol prohibition was about fuel. Half of America was making its own fuel every week and putting it in its car. 100% of farms in America were petroleum-free, making their 2 cents a gallon locally produced clean-burning fuel. Alcohol prohibition stepped in and said, no more fuel. But history didn't record that. History put this little thing up there that's about us getting drunk. And at the end of it, I love to remind people that the 10 years after alcohol prohibition ended, more people went to jail for making alcohol than during the 10 years of alcohol prohibition. So we picture these big fights with the gangsters and the 10 years of alcohol prohibition being something like the drug war. And yet it was after the peace was declared, after alcohol was legal, more people went to jail. More people lost their houses, lost their freedom, lost their integrity in this country because there wasn't a Jack Hare in the alcohol prohibition days. When they said, oh, we just want to end the war, whatever the terms are, we're fine with it. So we can never produce alcohol. It's super hyper-taxed, regulated by some bizarre new committee that's, always run kind of a vague above-ground mafia with the alcohol industry. So we need to learn our lessons from history. We did not win alcohol prohibition. We lost it. We need to win. And if we get the right for big corporations to sell us joints at 7-Eleven, we have not won out cannabis prohibition either. We will lose it. When we can locally produce the resources, we need to build houses, we need to build and make our clothes, we need to build everything in our infrastructure. That's when we win. So it's that kind of point where, ironically, once we get 2016, we get cannabis legal. In 2018, you'll see me running around with a ballot initiative trying to legalize alcohol. So we can turn the sustainable resource, with a 5,000-year-old technology, distilling, super dangerous. We've got nuclear power plants up and down the coast. Those aren't dangerous, and yet me distilling some alcohol for fuel is somehow dangerous, and that's what's held us back for 80 years. Too dangerous for community collectives to make their own alcohol. And yet we can split atoms and threaten the future of this entire planet to produce the same energy. So there's the foundation. That's what we're fighting for. That's what's on the table. And they're more than willing to play us just like alcohol and say, oh, it's legal, you guys won, you'll adjust to the rest of it. And don't worry, they won't have to shut down any prisons. Nothing will really, really change. Not good enough for me. I hope that answers your question. Kind of gets you in the right direction. Because, I got a biofuel, I got a Mercedes-Benz. I've been running on hemp oil for 6 years. It's as simple as that. Not simple, I got to get my hemp from Canada and it's expensive and all that. But when we can start producing, when we start having hemp oil come from the Central Valley, it's as easy as just putting it in your car. It's as easy as just making the market decision to say we don't need petroleum anymore, and then we will be done with petroleum. And then if we can, maybe we take some part of this massive police state industry and aim it back at the petroleum industry, to people who have actually done some damage. But I believe just through market decisions with an option. Why did they ban cannabis? Why didn't they just try to compete with it? Because they couldn't. So they had the only market strategy they had was to get rid of cannabis. And then petroleum still didn't make sense, but we used it anyways. But in a fair marketplace, it's got nothing going for it. There's literally no reason to use. The reason we use petroleum is because it's 3 miles under the ground and very hard to get to. So we don't have that option. So a very small group of people can control that market. That's why we use petroleum, not because it produces. My Mercedes runs the exact same gas. I get 25 miles a gallon, whether I put diesel number 2 in there or my hemp-based biofuel. My engine lasts 5 times as long. So the next 4 Mercedes-Benz I have to buy, I don't have to buy them. So yeah, it's cheaper per gallon, but it's cheaper for, 5 more vehicles I don't have to get. So that's, again, what we have on the table. The most striking thing I have found in research in the last year is this little startup company, a little research project, decided to make a hemp superconductor. A little superconductor, which is the foundation of almost all electronics in the world today. It's been going on for 100 years. There have been literally billions of dollars spent by 20 of the biggest corporations in the world to develop the best superconductors. It's all about storing electricity and then being able to discharge it. And they dig ores and acid wash them to create these little superconductors. This university came up with a little hemp superconductor, and it worked better. It worked better than the last 50 years of heavily produced iron ores and acids and all this stuff. And they said the energy level that went into making the hemp superconductor, which lasts longer, lighter weight, not even mentioning sustainable and biodegradable and all that, The energy level that went into making that, in contrast to the one that have to mix the ores and do 1,000-fold. 1,000th the energy for the hemp superconductor that works better than the ones that we're making billions of all over the world and leaving these giant holes in our planet to make. That's the burden we've carried for 100 years. We could have everything we have, and we could have had it at 1/1,000th the energy we put into this. We think about, are people hungry in the world? We think about the resources that are being having to be, kind of allocated carefully. That was the mistake. That was, the system using prohibition against us, using resources against us. And had we had it the other way, or can't cry over spilled milk. But what about the next 100 years? What about the next 100 years and what we hand on to the next generation? If we're producing our own food, fuel, and fiber out of the Central Valley, northern and California's got the highest grade medicines on the planet, we're the new Saudi Arabia. We could be the richest economy on the planet if we do this right. So again, I think that's what's on the table. That's why we're saying, hey, step forward. This isn't about who's going to sell cannabis at 7-Eleven. This is the future of the state. And ultimately, the whole world's watching us. So as we all know, this is the future of the world.
And I think that's about all the time we have. But thank you guys so much. Let's give
our
it up
pleasure.
for him.